What's up, everybody? What's up? My name's Paul Brunson. I'm coming to you from London. It is ridiculously hot here in London, so don't ask me why I have a turtleneck on because it is that hot. There's no reason to have a turtleneck on. But that being said, this is going to be, I think, one of those panels that you talk about later, you talk about tomorrow, because we have not only an incredible lineup, but I only have a few questions for the panelists because I want to make sure that I go to the chat. What we're going to do with this panel is I'm going to introduce the panel. I'll pose a few questions to the panel, but then I'll go back and then I'll go back to the chat. So remember, this is about business growth. And what I've been watching throughout the day, and I think that a lot of us are micro entrepreneurs, and there's been a lot of questions around investment, which is great, but I want to almost bring it back to a conversation around what can those of us who may never go after VC funding, may never go after angel funding, right? But we want to grow $100,000, $1 million, $10 million, $1 billion company, right? What opportunities are out here for us to grow these companies without capital, right? That's going to be one big question. But to help us with that, the first person that I want to bring on to the platform is Bili Sule. Now, Bili is a growth hacker. She's one of the top growth engineers. You know, it's interesting, in her bio, it says top growth engineers in Africa. I say top growth engineers in the world, right? She's formerly VP of growth at Jumia. And now she runs a company with the most clever name I've ever seen. Algorithm is the name of her company. She's the founder, and she does exactly what she's been doing for her entire career, and that is to help companies grow quickly and obtain market share. So, Bili, it's an honor to have you. Thank you very much for joining us.
Wow, what an introduction, Paul. Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here. Really looking forward to exploring how businesses can really scale in Africa and also in the diaspora. So really excited about this conversation. Nice to also meet you.
Yeah, definitely. And I see, look at the background too. We grow startups into unicorns. There we go.
That's the dream.
All right. Make sure everybody's saying what's up to Bili and welcoming her. Next up, I want to bring on my man, Jude. Okay, so Jude is here in the UK with me, right? He is someone who is not only an experienced banker, not only an experienced board advisor, but has almost a decade of board advisory, corporate banking, and wealth management experience. But, and here's the big but, Jude is the co-founder of literally one of my favorite organizations in the world, Cornerstone. Partners here in the UK, and Cornerstone Partners was an angel, I think was an angel syndicate at what point, or yeah. And they've grown, they've done some things out here on these streets. So Jude, Addo, thank you very much. It's an honor to have you here.
Thank you very much, Paul. Pleasure to be here.
Good deal. All right, next up, make sure you say what's up to Jude. All right, so next up is not only the winner of the longest beard that I have seen in the last 5 years. He's winning. He's beating Santa Claus right now on the beard front. But this is someone who, quite honestly, is someone who I've looked up to for almost my entire career. Someone who is in the US, shall we say, is one of the most notable entrepreneurs, and I believe should be one of the most notable entrepreneurs in the world. Not to give his whole bio, but just real quick, something very important is one of the first Black people in the United States to receive over $1 million in funding, went on, right, to co-found companies that have raised over $20 million, and then those companies either sold at multiples or went public. Rodney Sampson is the GOAT. And I'm just so honored to have him here. He is now co-funded OHUB, right? Which is, I think also OHUB's doing a lot of different things. And Rodney, you'll have to tell us about that. I think it's a tech hub, you're doing some seed stage investments as well. But Rodney is in the US. Rodney, thank you very much for being here.
It's a pleasure to be here, Paul. Hey, Jules. Hey, Billy. Hey, everybody. Excited to be here. Thank you.
There you go. When I grow up, I'm telling you, I'm going to get a beard like that when I grow. This is the most I can do. This is terrible.
Man.
This is the most I can do.
my wise protest. You know?
There you go. All right. So let's get it popping. Everybody's saying what's up to everybody. I love the love in the room. Remember, everyone who's watching, this is a phenomenal panel. I'll ask just a few questions, and then we'll go to you all in the chat for questions. Here's where I want to start things. I want to start things that could be controversial to some. Maybe it's not controversial, right? And I want everyone in the chat also to answer this question, okay? Have we, because think about this, we have 2 Black people from the UK or in the UK right now on this panel, right? We have someone, Bili in Nigeria. We have Rodney in the United States. But when you look at data, when you look at statistics, when you look at studies around us as Black professionals or us as entrepreneurs, it's always broken out. It's always, okay, here are the African businesses. Here are the Black British businesses. Here's what's happening among, Caribbean businesses. Here's what's happening among African Americans, right? There's always this division. There's always this breakout. But we all know we are family. We all know we are one community. And so the question I want to pose is, and everyone in the chat, please answer, give us your honest feedback on this. Have we reached a point where we need to reframe the discussion so that we're not only talking about now African businesses or UK Black British business, et cetera, but we're talking about African diaspora businesses where we look at each other as one community? Have we reached a point where we need to reframe the discussion? Right now, I see the chat exploding on hell yeah, yes, we have, change is good. So I hope the panelists don't go in another direction because it'll be interesting. But I tell you what, panelists, what do you think? Should we? And if we shouldn't, why? If we should, why? Unpack that for us. And any one of you all that wants to start, please get us going.
Okay, I'll start if I may. I would say actually there's merits to having both views, right? So there's merit to having the big picture view and also having the granular view. If you have only one or the other, you might lose out on a lot of insights and information, right? Just if I take sort of the analogy of a business, you have the general overview of the performance of a company, and that is useful to understand, how the company is performing as a whole towards its objectives. In a similar way, like, each department at a granular level will understand, okay, so in this department or in this segment, this is how we're performing, this is how we're doing, and you might not have that granularity at the macro level, right? So I think it's not necessarily a question of either or.
But you're saying it's not either or. You like both titling.
Yeah, I think it's important to have both, right? So I don't want to get sort of bogged down in the titlings, so to speak, but more about, okay, what information are we looking at? Are we looking at information and analysis of communities of businesses in Africa or Black British businesses? And their insights there, and they're useful because they're operating in a specific environment where there are particular mechanisms at play, and it's important to understand those, but it's equally important to understand what all Black businesses are doing in the diaspora as a whole. So I think, like, not to get too bogged down in sort of the segmentation or the naming, but really looking at the value of understanding the granular level and also the macro level more broadly.
Okay, all right, fair enough. I like it. Bili was real political with that. Real political. She said both. She likes both. Okay, so Jude, Rodney, what are we thinking?
Yeah, I can jump in. I think I probably couldn't agree more with Bili, and I've been known to be a diplomat myself, so excuse the political answer, but I think there's a bit of merit to that viewpoint. And I think if I'm understanding the question correctly, it's effectively contemplating sort of an amalgamation of the Black race and seeing if we can come up with collective solutions to collective problems. And in my view, there is merit in that approach, i.e. coming together, because coming together, tends to drive bargaining power, and in other words, drive economies of scale, so to speak. But I feel sometimes there's a danger in doing something like that, as it ignores the nuances, so to speak, and individual plights of many groups, especially when they form the minority within the minority. And an example of that is, for example, in the UK, this whole term of BAME, Black, Asian, minority, ethnic, it's effectively clumped all minorities in one bucket. And the general assumption, therefore, is different minorities within the same bucket tend to have the same problems, and therefore they're going to use a one-size-fits-all solution to address those. You see, there's no doubt in my mind, actually, that there are common hurdles between African businesses and Black American businesses and Black British businesses and the different groups and all those in between. And this particularly stems from the fact that we share a common history, so to speak. But the form in which current day problems take actually differ from group to group. And one of those problems, for example, is the lack of access to capital for African American businesses. Actually, the root cause of that is quite different from the lack of access of capital to African businesses. If I may be a little bit reductive, in one case, it's stemmed through sort of systemic prejudice. In another case, the root cause is there just isn't enough capital in the market flowing. So I think I'm with Bili on this one. It's good to look at sort of how do we drive economies of scale by amalgamation, but notwithstanding looking at the individual nuances between the groups and the different challenges that each of them face.
Okay, that's fair. That was well unpacked, right? Arena right here says great insight. That was great insight. Okay. So now I see that, Rodney, you said that this is something that you covered in your book as well.
Indeed. I like to address it from the perspective of one, I think anything we decide to do or not to do, as long as it's not performative theater, what good is it that we align ourselves as collective members of the African diaspora, but yet we actually do nothing? And I think there's a lot of, performative branding initiatives that are launched that absolutely have no concrete metrics and goals driven. And so if we're going to align globally, and I think we must, because there's absolutely not enough density, and I'll talk specifically from the high growth technology startup and venture ecosystem. There only been 200 Black and brown firms in America that have raised over $1 million in venture capital in the last 20 years. And that's not even one a month. And so you compare that to last year in America alone, 11,000 firms, mostly white male and female, and Asian male and female firms raised that money. And so there are nuances there as well, because out of the 200, I know some amazing Nigerian brothers and sisters that are part of that American, so we also get into who's also in America. I happen to have been born here in America, but you have those that have come to America and have found their way into the tech startup and venture ecosystem. But because there's not enough density, now you juxtapose that to the 2.9 million Black-owned businesses that may be more traditional, either small, mom and pop, Main Street, service-based firms. Well, because of COVID-19, we've lost 41% of those businesses. So we've lost entrepreneurial density. Out of those businesses, only 110,000 of them have more than 2 employees. So even in America, when you think about Black business and Black entrepreneurship, only 100,000+ businesses out of 40 million in population have businesses that generate enough income for more than 2 people to be employed, yet there are over 9 million Black people in America that are unemployed. So there's a gap there. I don't know the data for the UK. And of course, when you talk about the continent, there are 50 plus nations to take into consideration. So then I do agree with both of you that, you know, there's the global diasporic construct that we could align on in terms of how do we pool our capital, pool our content, pool our resources, pool our branding. It's enough of us that we could pick one business a month and say, we're going to make that business a multi-million-dollar business if we all supported it, right? Maybe 1 month is US, maybe it's UK, maybe it's Nigeria, maybe it's Kenya, maybe it's Ghana. Black people are everywhere. There are Black people in South America, Black people in the Caribbean, right? So if we're gonna do it, we gotta come together, but then we also have to take a step back and say, well, what works in America may not work in Gabon, right? May not work in Uganda, may not work in South Africa or Namibia. And these are all places that I've done business with over the last 20 years. And there have been nuances on the ground in those respective countries that I had to learn and be sensitive to. So I think it's both. It's not one or the other, but the devil is in the details.
Okay. All right. So now this brings me to a point that we all were discussing, and I was making this as my third question, but this is, I think, a great segue, because Rodney, you just mentioned, yeah, if we were able to collectively come together and invest or buy from or support one business right around every day, we could make one $1 million business. Every day of the year, we can make one new Black business $1 million business. That's a collaborative idea without really financing, right? What are some ideas for everyone watching right now? Because you see that we have representation from all over the world watching. What are some collaborative ideas that we can do right now to help to strengthen our union, right? So what do you all think those would be? And Rodney, actually, let me just pick right back up with you, since you just mentioned that idea. What are some ideas that you have?
Well, one, I mean, we think a lot about building ecosystems in Opportunity Hub, and we've been doing that for 7 years. The whole concept of building an ecosystem where you have not just the financing resources, but you have the mentors, the people who have experience in company building, you have the technology talent or the subject matter expertise, you have political support, you have research institution and academic support, you have companies and customers, you have observers. Those are the makeup of an ecosystem. And I think one of the things that we could do is, one, all join one ecosystem. I would like it to be OHUB, but I'm sure there are other ecosystem builders in respective countries. But if we all could just be a part of one ecosystem, just like we've all become members of other social networking sites, that we have tipped the wealth of non-Black owned sites around the world. Every time in America, when a young woman or man is killed, we go to Twitter, and our tweets and our posts drive up the valuation of those companies. And many of us don't even own stock in those companies, right? So one, the least we can do is all come together on one platform first. And then iron sharpens iron. How can we match with one another? How can Bili in Nigeria match with Jude in the UK around something substantive, right? People do it on Tinder and they do it on these websites around social constructs, but what if we, and relational constructs, but what if we did it in terms of, I'm negotiating a term sheet. Have you ever done this before? You know, I'm closing my first investor. Have you ever closed an investor before? What should I be negotiating for best practices? And that's what we could do at a minimum. And then when it's time to amplify businesses for support, we should be able to absolutely go invest in them, maybe using equity crowdfunding or some of the new DeFi or blockchain technologies that would allow us to globally support, or we consume from each other, if nothing else. That would be my advice.
Yeah, I'll tell you what, the chat likes it. The chat thinks it's a great idea. So everyone join OHUB. Pretty much that's what we're going to do. Everyone watching, join OHUB, and we'll let Rodney take us from there. But I say that half jokingly, but not really, right? I think we should.
We all in business, right?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. So Jude, Bili, what do you think are some ideas like what Rodney just rolled out, collaborative ideas for us?
Yeah, from my perspective, I think I'm a lot more simplistic in my views. I truly love Rodney's perspective, and I think there's a lot of power in some of the views that he shared. What we particularly did in the UK is a group of friends and I just started an investment club because we knew that there was a dearth of capital in terms of available within the Black community, especially in the UK. And we also acknowledge that although some of us were very successful either as entrepreneurs or in our corporate careers, statistics don't lie that 9 out of every 10 startups fail, right? So are you going to, play probabilities, or are you going to sort of democratize access to as many businesses as possible such that, you improve your chances of being on the winning team? So that's effectively what we did. We pulled our funds together as a group of 20 individuals. We started off with 6 co-founders, and we decided, okay, we're going to just start investing in each other's businesses. And in that way, it sort of empowered one another, but also we realized actually that we could dovetail this into the wider community. And then we transitioned from a pure investment club into an angel syndicate, whereby we started making investments in Black-owned businesses within the UK. And I think for me, that's one of the most powerful ways to actually put your money where your mouth is and back the community to help improve the chances of success. I agree, especially with Rodney, in that another way to do it is just consumerism, right? Buy. You can either prop up the business by investing in it, or you can prop up the business by buying its products. And I hugely welcome some of the initiatives to that end in the UK, to name one of them, which is Black Pound Day. And I'm sure, Paul, you're familiar with Black Pound Day, having been in the UK for the past couple of months, which is just an initiative within the UK that we all, within the Black community, focus the Black pound on backing and buying from Black businesses, buying from Black founders. And it's been hugely successful. And I think I'll park it there and invite Bili to share her views as well.
Also, Jude, there were a few people who asked about the contact information for Cornerstone, because I'm with you, right? If we can't actually form those investment syndicates ourselves, we can join Cornerstone. Yeah. So if you can include that in the chat, that would be great. So Bili, what do you think? Because you're in the motherland right now. So what do you think we could be doing?
So when I think about collaboration, first of all, I start to think about what are the main sort of hurdles that we have to overcome. And I think, first of all, we need to tackle a mindset shift. And when I think about this, it's, when I think within the African context, in my experience anyway, and if I go to a market in Lagos, for example, you'll have a whole section with tomatoes, and it's a tomato seller after a tomato seller after a tomato seller. So we see somebody doing something and it's working right, and what we want to go and do is to go in and replicate that. So for example, Jumia entered the market in Nigeria with e-commerce, and then all of a sudden everybody wants to have their own e-commerce startup. I think what we need to start thinking about is to shift our mindset from this idea of, the pie is not big enough, we have to individually create pies, to thinking more about collaboration and looking at, okay, so somebody or a startup is doing something great here. So where in the value chain are there inefficiencies or are there opportunities? So for example, if I take the e-commerce example again, it's going in and saying, okay, so Jumia has launched e-commerce, they've captured significant market share. How do I go in and see how we can improve logistics operations and create a startup to support that? So it's not just, okay, copying and pasting. I think it's very easy for us to do that, especially with Africans or Caribbeans who live abroad. You see something that's working in the West and think, okay, I can do that in my home country. but it's not always, it's really good to look at the opportunities specifically, look at the opportunities that are out there and thinking, okay, where can I add value? Where are there inefficiencies? And really growing something large and significant rather than having lots of, fragmented businesses and opportunities. So that's one thing. I think the other issue is, with collaboration, there's a big trust issue that exists, right? And that's a hurdle that you have to try and get over. And this exists in any sort of context. And particularly so because sometimes, there's a negative reputation around doing businesses or doing business in Africa with a lot of fraud, etc. So there's a huge trust gap that needs to be overcome. And I don't think I really have an answer as to how that can happen. I think there needs to be a lot of transparency. There's a lot of fear around, if you're being transparent with what you're doing, somebody can steal it, etc. So there needs to be a safe way to drive transparency. And then when I think about, collaboration and maybe some catalysts that already exist in certain markets that will sort of bridge the trust gap and create some sort of safety or safe environment. I remember working a lot with like the Chamber of Commerce in Nigeria. So, looking at the British Council, for example, or the German Chamber of Commerce. So they typically, will work with very vetted companies or trustworthy companies that they associate with and catalyze business partnerships and relationships cross-border. So if you're looking at, okay, collaboration, that could be like sort of a safe vehicle to get into that. So yeah, and I think one thing, I don't know if it's directly addressing your question, but it's sort of, it's a related topic, right? So when I think about collaboration, I see a lot of, Africans in the diaspora coming back to, create startups that they've seen work in the West. But we're not really thinking so much about, okay, what will work for the masses in Africa? And so there's not so much innovation going on. We're just thinking about, okay, how can we adapt existing solutions in Africa and then take it from there. However, it's like, it's very, very difficult to, like Rodney was saying, you can't just copy and paste something and think it's going to work in the African market, one. And then also we have to realize that when we take sort of these Western business models or ideas, we're really only catering to a tiny percent of the addressable market. The real addressable market size in Africa is at the grassroots level, and nobody has cracked that yet. We don't have enough research. We don't have enough academic research or scientific experimentation going on to really understand how can we develop new innovations or technologies or methods that will create value for people at the grassroots. Making maybe small ticket sizes, but at scale, that's really where the opportunity is. And so when we think about collaboration or innovation, I'd really love to see more businesses that are thinking about, okay, how do we serve the grassroots at that level and innovate?
Yeah, that was powerful. I mean, I tell you what, when you said mindset, we were like in church, like, mm-hmm. And then when you said trust, we were like, pass the collection plate. Because on that one, because I was thinking, you're absolutely right. But I do have a thought on trust. And just because of the time, I would love just to get a quick hit from you, Rodney, quick hit from you, Jude, on how do you believe that we increase trust? Because I think this is everything, right? One of the things for me that I will say is being here in the UK. So I've been in the UK now for almost 3 years. And it wasn't until coming to the UK that I got closer to understanding and becoming educated in particular on West Africa, Ghana and Nigeria. Right. And it starts with minimal things like go eat some suya. Like it starts with like that. Right. Burn your tongue out real quick, have that burn and then appreciate it starts, I think, with the respect and appreciation and educating yourself on the culture and the cultures. And then it builds from there. But I'd love to get your thoughts on that, Rodney and Jude, because I think that's huge. Trust. We don't trust each other.
Yeah, trust is one of those intangible currencies that is like a non-negotiable, right? That said, developing trust is hard. particularly for a people that have been, taught to mistrust systems, institutions, and people. It's sort of been built into all of us just because of how we have been abused as a people, for centuries. And I think, I won't say is that it's into our DNA, but it's probably passed along in our upbringing where we're socialized to just proceed with caution in everything that we do. Sometimes rightfully so, right? And I think that balance is the key to everything. And what I can personally speak to, I remember going to Windhoek, Namibia back in '03 and thinking that, I was just gonna drop on the continent and I was just gonna take over. And I had a rude awakening that was very humbling. And I learned a lesson very, very, very early, that you had to humble yourself. No matter how much education, exposure you believe you have to humble yourself to learn from the people that you believe you want to do business with. And we call it today customer empathy in the startup world, or customer discovery, right? And for people to be transparent with you, they have to learn to trust you. So breaking bread with them, extending a heart. One of my mentors, John Maxwell, taught me, extend a heart before you extend a hand. You meet people in business and it's like they don't want to have anything to do with you unless it's transactional and it only benefits them. And those are short-term relationships, right? I believe that business relationships should be like marriages. They should be long-term and there should be a commitment for life. And you should work on it, right? And not make assumptions. A lot of people want to be transactional in the moment and feel like if you can't do business with me right now, you offer me no value. And I think we need to shift that on its head and say, in an ecosystem, how can I bring value to you? What are you working on? How can I add value to what you're doing? Oh, let me introduce you to this person or that person, right? And build that trust through serving rather than asking.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more with Rodney on this. I don't think I have anything further to add. I think he hit the nail on the head when he said, culturally, we are almost programmed to distrust. I mean, if you've grown up in an African household, you know it when your mom gives you a look in your auntie's house when she passes you a plate, right? Like, what? I thought this was my auntie, So, but I think how do we get past that? Because I don't want to focus on the problem. I think what really helps, and I think Rodney touched on this beautifully, is just spending time with people to build that trust. It's just a function of spending time, listening more than you speak, and really trying to immerse yourself in somebody else's experience, because that's what builds trust. And to be honest with you, trust actually emanates from a place of track record, right? You can have faith in somebody, right? But it's typically because you're taking a leap of faith, i.e. there's no track record there. To go from faith to trust, you need to have built some sort of track record in being, a person of integrity, or having done stuff that is worthy of trust. And that is only a function of time, right? You have to spend the time in order to build that track record, one, but number two, in order to actually allow people to experience the track record of your integrity. Just building those relationships, making them less transactional and more empathetic is my view on that.
Yeah, that was brilliant, Jude. I'll never forget that, actually, between that analogy of trust and track record and the need for track record. That was brilliant. All right, so for everyone watching, I'm going to go to you for questions. You could see that the panel is incredible, right? I wanted to make sure that we have enough time for questions. So I have one last question for the panel. And then if you can, please, in the chat, go ahead and enter your questions. If it's to a particular panelist, go ahead and include that. If it's to the entire panel, go ahead and include that. So here's my last question. And it's interesting because you all have touched upon this. Bili, you've really gone deep on this, which has been great. And that is, where's the opportunity, right? I think what the beauty of this panel is, we have a growth engineer and we have two investors, right? If there's anyone to ask about where is their opportunity, it's the three of you. So where is the opportunity? And not just in Africa, but in the African diaspora. Where is it? But here's the caveat. Where is it for us, Black people? Where is the most promising opportunity in the diaspora for us? Where is it? $1 million question. I'm ready. I have my pen, my pad. Anyone can take it. I'm ready. Anyone.
I think Bili has the answer to this one.
Thanks for the nomination, Jude. Okay. When I think about this question, I think about it in two sides, right? So there's what are the opportunities here in Africa? And when I'm thinking about that, first of all, I'm thinking about following the money, right? So historically, where has the money come from and to? So, you know, if we looked 10 years ago, there wasn't really a lot of sort of investment capital coming into startups in Africa. Over the last 10 years, you've seen like a huge increase there. And it started off with some experimentation with, you know, music businesses and entertainment businesses. So for example, in 2008, I remember a report done by Digest Africa saying, you know, there was about $276 million in funding raised in the fintech space specifically in Africa, and that's for just 92 deals. So that really sort of started bringing in the big money, right? So that was where the opportunity was. But now, you know, using this sort of tomato market example that I give, you know, where it seems like there's a pattern where, oh, somebody is doing something and so we all want to do it. And so there's been an influx of lots of other sort of fintech startups with not a lot of differentiation or significantly different value adds. And so, you know, that space is still being watched. It's a bit saturated at the moment, but we're just watching for, you know, a successful exit there over the next few years. But what we've been seeing now is money coming into health tech businesses. So there was a huge raise by 54 Gene. A lot of you would have heard about that. So there's a lot of money coming into health tech at the moment. I know Founders Factory Africa, I consult for them as well. And so they're investing a lot in health tech businesses as well. So there are lots of opportunities there, and even more so now with the COVID context, it makes sort of the propositions a lot stronger. But again, we need to go away from this mindset of, you know, let's just copy and paste and do lots of different startups, but think about, okay, what is a really strong proposition and how can we create things that establish the value chain and create a stronger proposition. And then there's also, you know, agri-tech and energy that's coming up. So that's sort of, you know, I don't know if you agree with me, Jude. Jude would probably have a better picture from an investment perspective, but that's where sort of the opportunities are in terms of creating African startups. On the diaspora side, when I'm thinking about it, I look at, okay, so how have families created wealth in the past, especially in the West? And we see, you know, there's a lot of things around home ownership, land ownership that, you know, this generation just isn't thinking about. So I see a lot of opportunities, and I've seen, you know, some vehicles created as well for diasporans or Africans, wherever they are in the world, to invest in sort of land and real estate vehicles at home as well. So that's another thing that I find really interesting, because, you know, we're not really thinking about this as a generation in general, thinking about, okay, how do we build wealth aside from, you know, the work that we're doing on the business that we're doing? How do we create sustainable investment vehicles that have, you know, stood the test of time? Obviously, there's the trust issue there as well. But I've seen, you know, companies like Powerview Limited, I've seen companies like Joet and Uru Trust really creating sustainable vehicles for diasporans to invest in real estate in Nigeria, for example. So that's where I sort of see some opportunities. It's a bit long, bit of a long answer, but
I tell
yeah.
Bili, but you're an engineer. We wouldn't expect a shorter answer. You're an engineer. That's what you do. That's what you do. Own it. Own it. All right, Jude, Rodney, what's one quick hit, and then we'll spend the next 20 minutes, because questions are coming in, answering these questions.
Quick hit from me. I agree on the fintech side of things. If you look, especially within Africa, insurance has the lowest penetration. I think there is so much opportunity there, and InsurTech should if I'm betting on anything, I'm going to bet on InsurTech. There's a company that I sit on the board of, and no bias there, of course, called Bima, and they're doing some really phenomenal things across the continent and in Southeast Asia. So that's where I see opportunity. Outside of that, in terms of the wider diaspora, I look at where Black people tend to over-index, and we tend to over-index in industries such as media, fashion, food. Those are the sort of industries where we tend to over-index as a proportion of our population. And if I was going to say where I see collaborative opportunities across the diaspora, it would be in these industries, because this is where we have a competitive advantage and where we can actually drive economies of scale. And I'll pause there for Rodney to jump in as well.
Yeah, no, that was great, Jude. Actually, you answered Ahmad Dodson. You answered a question already, Jude, that was in the queue, which is great. Rodney, what do you think?
Sure, I'm gonna go broader. I just think in terms of the entire African diaspora is that we all should be looking to get an edge on anything in the fourth industrial revolution, which means that's all industries. I heard insurance, I heard health, property, every industry, agriculture, everything that you can think of is being disrupted by automation, artificial intelligence, machine learning, quantum computing, computer vision, augmented reality, virtual reality, you name it, blockchain. I dropped the link. I came with gifts, you know, y'all. I came with $1 million in Bitcoin to give away from Draper Gordon Home. I'm on the board, venture partner there. I dropped it in Blacks on the blockchain. But my point is, to get there, I think we need to put an emphasis on skilling up. You know, we literally need 10 million people like Bili. We need 10 million engineers, Black software developers that can write code, and not just write code, because we know we're moving towards the no-code world as well, but also can build edge technologies like the ones that I talked about. We are the ethics in tech. If we're not in tech, it's harmful to us. And so if we don't get ahead of the curve in terms, and look, Western society is building tech and it is harming the world because white guys are not thinking about everybody else, to be completely honest. So I would love to see 10 million software developers or 10 million salespeople. Because once we build the tech, we need skilled salespeople to go sell the tech, right? I'm sure Bili could use a salesperson in every country where Black people are represented, not just on the continent, but in America, in the UK, you name it, right? And then I think we all need to look at ourselves as investors at some level. We need to be investors in each other. More of us would be better entrepreneurs as investors than actual operators, truth be told. And so that's how I would frame it from a macro level.
There you go. No, I love it. I love it. All right. So panel, we have a lot of questions and we only have 15 minutes. So what I'll do is I'll start posing these questions. Once again, we might have some rooms as well, guys. So if you have questions, make sure you drop it in the Q&A. I'll pose these questions. Not everyone has to take it. Let's just have one person take it and we'll just keep flowing. And they are wide, these questions. So the first question is, what advice would you give to someone who is seeking funding for an animation product? Now, I co-founded an animation company and had to close it due to the recession and lacked funding to do a feature length and TV series. So what advice would you give me if I'm now seeking funding for this animation product?
My proposal would be target investors that have your specific thesis for investment. For instance, I'm an enterprise B2B software investor. I get excited about software that goes into enterprises, right? A film project doesn't interest me, even though I understand the importance of film and animation. It's just, I pull on my 20 years of skill set. And what I see a lot of entrepreneurs, they're busy targeting all investors where they should be targeting smart. And so find investors that are specific to your thesis. You may say, okay, I don't know where they are. you've got to dig a little bit deeper in your diligence and your research. They hang around accelerators and incubators. There are now accelerators that focus on creative and animation. A lot of corporations like Disney, Netflix here in America just put up money for creatives. Facebook, oh wow, Facebook just launched yesterday, I want to say a $25 million fund for creatives, right? So that's a plug for you all on the creative side. But I would just say, look for the investors that meet your investment thesis. And then finally, think about crowdfunding. Everyone wants the one angel and the top VCs to back them. But equity crowdfunding is growing like crazy, particularly here in the States. And it would be dope for that to be developed legally in every country that Black people are in, because the securities laws are different in each country.
Yeah, I love how Rodney said legally, because we know we've been equity crowdfunding for hundreds of years.
Look, we tithe to churches, we might as well tithe to ourselves, right?
This is true. This is true. All right. Next question is one of my favorites. This is a huge question, but try to give us a succinct answer, and that is, how do we deal with the corruption of our leaders? How do we deal with the corruption? How do we grow our businesses when these leaders are out here taking all the money? How do we deal with this?
I was hoping Bili would answer that, given she's on the continent. But I can take a stab at it. Look, I think there is no doubt that corruption is an encumbrance to building businesses. But I look at that as just one obstacle, right? I think as entrepreneurs, you would have to have the tenacity to sort of overcome whatever obstacle it may be. Today it may be corruption, another day it may be a flood or a fire that's burned your factory. I've seen many entrepreneurs who've, some of them were in the diaspora, who moved back and have encountered all sorts of obstacles, but have overcome them. I think, unfortunately, we live in a society, or if you're on the continent, especially in Africa, unfortunately we are sort of encumbered by perhaps poor leadership or corrupt politicians, but it's quite ubiquitous. I mean, corruption in America may look different, but there is still corruption there. Corruption in Europe may look different, but there's still a lot of corruption there. We are all, faced with all sorts of, obstacles. And I think one of the major things I would encourage everyone to do is just try to overlook those things and find a way to make your business a success, because there are many, many entrepreneurs on the continent and outside the continent doing that, even in the face of massive levels of corruption. And I think that's my 2 cents.
You know what's interesting? As soon as I saw that question, they were like, "These leaders are corrupt." I was like, "Yeah, Donald Trump is." But I was like, "Hold on, that's not what you're talking about." I was like, "You're right. You're right. He is." Okay. Next question. There were a lot of questions around this. Is there a Pan-African crowdfunding or investment platform that exists right now?
What about Ovamba? OVAMBA. I know they were US based, but they were working to maybe aggregate US capital to invest in startups on the continent. I know there was a framework. There have been conversations here about creating the Pan-African. I think the challenge we get into are each country has its own securities laws.
Yeah.
And you literally have to get the permission of each nation to allow for equity crowdfunding. Where I've seen outside of America, and it's worked, is when the security token offerings were moving around the internet and they were raising millions of dollars, and then central banks like the SEC in America started weighing in, and they kind of shut it down,
You know what? When that question was posed and we all had to think a second, opportunity, massive opportunity. I was like, note to self, All right. I like this question. This one is, the diaspora is beautifully diverse with loads of cultures and approaches. Is it setting ourselves unrealistic expectations in our hopes to collaborate as a monolithic Africa? What other cultures of scale like ours have done that successfully? Now, you know what? Let me tell you. This is what Jude is thinking. Jude, this is what Jude's thinking. Bili, can you handle that one? Can you do that?
Yeah, Billy's my hero.
Jude is like, Bili, go ahead. You go.
It's a good question. Yeah, but Bili, go for it.
Yeah, it's a good question, right? But I think also we have to be very careful not to think about culture based on sort of stereotypes, right? So we need to think about, okay, so what are actually like cultural attributes of certain groups of people, and how can we interact or collaborate with them, right? So looking at, rather than saying, you know, Nigerians, you do business with Nigerians this way, look at, okay, what are the attributes of the specific culture? They are very relationship oriented, so it's important that, like in your strategies, to build strong relationships. If you go to the West, for example, it's a very individualistic type of culture. So I think it's important to look beyond sort of cultural stereotypes or just sort of, I don't know how to explain it. Looking beyond the stereotypes to really understanding, okay, what are the actual attributes of each culture, and what are the behaviors, and how can you collaborate with that, or how can you sort of adapt to that, rather than saying, okay, looking at it on a specific sort of cultural level.
Okay. All right. I tell you, here's what I want to do. I got to be the guy that say the party. I got to shut down the party, y'all. So we got Bili, Rodney, Jude. This is all I have to say is thank you, panelists. Thank you to the ScaleUp team. This is an incredible conference that you've put on. I've been watching all day. It's incredible. And all I have to say at the end here, they're the ladies. There they go. And can I just say, just make sure everyone, you hear what was just said, right? You don't have to do everything. You don't have to do 3 things. You don't have to do 2 things, but do something. Do something. I think the commonality among all of us is that we all want to see change. That's the reason why we're spending our time in a conference, right? We all want to see change, but change starts with action, right? Starts with action. So make sure that you do something. Ladies.
Absolutely. Paul, it's been a long road getting here, and thank you so much for putting this together.
It's been phenomenal.
It was an honor. It was good. It was really good.
Thank you.
Thank you all.